All right. Thanks, David, for giving me some time to talk about a few things that we wanted to discuss. Just introducing David Dahm. Thank you for making some time. David, can you just tell me about your background of who you are and what you do, just for the audience?
Oh, thanks, Sanchita, and thank you for inviting me this evening to have a bit of a chat about standards. I'm basically a chartered accountant and a CPA. I have been for around about 27 years across Australia, and I've worked and specialised in the healthcare industry and done a lot of work with the medical profession, the healthcare profession in both the public hospital and private hospital and private medical practice areas.
Okay.
So I've seen a lot over the years, as well as being an AgPal surveyor for accreditation, so I could do a Bowie-Dick test. I actually did about 10 years on people's sterilizers, as much as signing someone's tax return. So I guess I've held a pretty broad and narrow and deep range of experiences that I guess some might find quite unique, some of those insights.
Cool. So shall we say, basically, we do have, me being a doctor, I know that I've noticed there's a lot of accountants now that are saying that they do, subspecialize, I suppose, in doctors and that profession. Shall we say you're like the sort of godfather of that?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm the godfather, but I'd say I was probably one of the very early pioneers of that.
Cool.
Back in 1992.
Excellent.
And took a very keen interest in, and not necessarily just doing the tax returns of an individual doctor or their financial planning, but really looking at the business side of healthcare.
Sure.
And taking quite an interest in how they worked in running their practices, dealing with their patients.
Cool. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, David, but from what I understand, and by all means, I'm not really a mathematical sort of accounting type of human being, but from what I understand of the accounting profession, it is a profession, and I guess that word is really important for all of us to understand, especially in the medical fraternity, because there seems to be a bit of a gap in us being, defined as a profession. And this is a question that a lot of people ask. So can you explain to me what exactly is a profession? And also, I do notice in a lot of your talks, you talk about standards and how there's no agreed standards. Can you tell me about those two things?
Okay. Well, I mean, basically a profession is a disciplined group of individuals who adhere to both technical and ethical standards. Mm-hmm. And these are usually commonly agreed peer-reviewed standards. So, for example, in the accounting profession, where I come from, we have actually, international accounting standards called the International Financial Reporting Standards that all accountants across the world report to. So that's why, you see, the stock exchange reported on the 6 o'clock news. So that's sort of one of the key benefits. And the basis of it is that, when you hold yourself out as being an accountant, particularly like a chartered accountant or a CPA, what you're saying is that, your group, possesses special knowledge and skills that are widely recognised from a body of learning, which is derived from research, education and training at a very high level that is recognised by the public and it's in the public's interest. So, and these skills are used in the interest of others. So I guess that's probably where we're coming from. And we're saying, well, is engineering profession? Well, yes, it is, and medicine as well. But they've all evolved, but to a certain level. What I would say is the accounting profession has taken it to an international level, where we do have, international bodies and we have regional bodies, and we do have commonly agreed standards which seem to be absent, in particular in the medical and healthcare profession, from research done by Professor Bill Runciman back in 2012 in his CareTrack study, where he said that a lot of standards that are being set or being followed are either out of date, are inconsistent, they're not commonly peer review agreed. And in fact, a lot of medical research, it builds every 73 days. There's a lot of new research that comes out. It can take up to 17 years for that research to be actually applied in practice.
Sure.
So there's a lot of challenges there for practitioners to sort of apply the most contemporary and current clinical work against that backdrop.
I guess, it's pretty, when I first came across your talks and things that you were talking about, it was very compelling because in a point of view of a patient, it's pretty, I don't know, scary that, doctors, I guess, don't really have a commonly agreed, peer-reviewed standard, or I guess, I don't know if, shall we call it benchmark? And I mean, what does this actually mean for the medical fraternity, do you think?
It basically means that, your professional bodies are researching, they're teaching from a common hymn book, so to speak, to their profession, and they are self-regulating themselves, and they're saying, look, listen, if there's ever a problem, here are our published standards that are on our website that you can go to and follow these particular rules. And these standards are actually publicly available. They're not just sort of, privy just to, the profession itself. That, it is quite open, it's quite transparent, it's quite accountable.
Yep.
And so that's really what the key objective is.
I guess, can I just for the audience, because I know I do get a lot of questions about how you have been involved in all this mess. Just a little bit of context about how I contacted you as one of your many, many audiences, and, what you see is a solution going forward.
Okay, well, I mean, I first really came across this problem because I was, it was one of in my earlier days, as being a practice management consultant as much as a chartered accountant, because I wanted to specialise in this area, I put a survey box out, a patient survey box out, and we got some feedback that, a particular doctor at the time, a male one, was being misunderstood, and his bedside manner made female patients quite uncomfortable, and as a result, I decided to, make a recommendation to the client to establish a women's clinic because that's what women wanted. And now by doing that, I thought that was a great idea. It's hard enough to get women to, attend those types of treatments.
Definitely.
And as a consequence, this particular female doctor conducted a specialised clinic, and within about 6 months, actually more than 6 months, about a year in total, there was a call from Medicare, the Medicare accountant, saying, look, this particular doctor's been over-servicing, that she's outside what is called the statistical normal distribution curve, the bell curve.
Yes.
And she's an outlier, she's just doing more pap smears than her male counterparts. And therefore, could you please ask her to pay it back, or else we're going to go through this TSR process.
Sure.
Now, I was quite shocked. I thought, hang on, that's not the reason for Medicare to exist, and it was only, a statistical anomaly. How come they didn't profile this particular condition for their subspecialty interest? And why was there such a quite intimidating approach to actually solving this particular issue in terms of, did they speak to the patients, et cetera, et cetera? So this is where my first interest was piqued. I guess I wrote an article about it that featured at the time in one of these major medical magazines. I think it was Australian Doctor. And I did question, did the government have a right to interfere in the doctor-patient relationship? And before you know it, I think, by the late 2000s, there was a lot of practitioners writing to me who were specialising in drug and alcohol clinics, in chronic disease management, Indigenous clinics, saying that they were being audited. And again, they weren't too sure why or wherefore. And I really started to question, well, what is the basis of these particular audits, and was it creating what was called, what I named at the time, Medicare audit anxiety?
Correct.
So, and then what came from that is I asked that question further, but to our federal politicians, and we managed to organise with a group of doctors in 2011 a federal Senate inquiry into Medicare and how Medicare audits practitioners. And it was interesting when the question was asked, and I particularly asked the question, look, do you have commonly agreed and peer-reviewed standards? The professional bodies, all of them, the government, Medicare, MDOs, all of them admitted to the fact there were no commonly agreed peer-reviewed professional standards. And I thought, well, how can you prosecute somebody when you don't know what the road rules are? If you don't know 60 is the speed limit, then how can you prosecute somebody for going too fast?
Absolutely.
So that became quite a concern.
Mm-hmm. And just, on that note, just to conclude today's podcast, can you just tell me what exactly has the Senate inquiry actually, concluded with, and has anything been done about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was one conclusion which I did raise, and I'm in the Federal Senate, the Federal Senate inquiry's Hansard, and they did take up a recommendation that they should be publishing things like taxation rulings, like the accounting fraternity has for the taxpayer, But nothing has actually happened. So that's why I find myself surprised here talking to you about a problem that should have been fixed up in 2011, and it was actually clinically backed in a piece of clinical research by Professor Bill Runciman, who is an anaesthetist and international expert on this issue in 2012, that, there are no commonly agreed clinical standards that are peer-reviewed here in Australia or in the world.
Excellent.
So, not a lot.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David, and we will catch you again. Thanks.
Thanks.